Hello and welcome to the Runners World podcast with me, Rick Pearson.
And me, Ben Hobson.
Today we're speaking with Robbie Britton about the merits of the 10-day training cycle. Ooh.
Well, I can't believe it. He's just breaking down boundaries and shattering conceptions.
It's not just about doing a week, Ben. You don't have to necessarily follow a 7-day training cycle. That's the headline, isn't it?
Yeah, it's basically, and we've said 10, but Robbie talks about the 10-day and 14-day, so sort of 2-week blocks, and it immediately appeals. And I guess because he talks about it, but the long run is always the sort of sticky point with the sort of changing the week format because everyone has the weekend to do the long run, and that's kind of it. But it's basically readjusting the volume so that it's not so condensed into 7 days. So you're still running maybe the same volume, maybe a bit more, but it's a bit more balanced over 2 weeks rather than trying to fit in I don't know, normally some speed, an easy and long, and like in 7 days, that's just 3 days already. So I mean, it's really, I mean, it's one of those ones that sound, when you say it as a sentence, it doesn't sound earth-shatteringly like, oh my God. But actually, the reality is that most of us have probably always trained in a 7-day format rather than a 10 or a 14.
So and it can be a bit overwhelming, kind of like, if you think, right, if you're trying to be a gold standard runner, it's like you should be doing lots of easy running, a long run, a tempo run, an interval session, and probably hills. And you can imagine trying to fit that all into 7 days can be a bit like, that's not,
with work, with everything else. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's a bit of fun. But hey, before that, I've got a bit of science for you, Ben.
Oh, I love it. I haven't had any of this for a while.
Oh, a bit of science, yes. Have you got a friend with a terrible running style, and are you worried that running with them is sort of making your own running style less efficient?
Oh, wow.
Don't worry, Ben. Don't worry, because a new study has looked into this.
Backhanded way of you telling me something.
So this is a Japanese study looked into this, and 2 runners were placed on parallel treadmills, separated only by a thin partition. They couldn't see each other, but they could hear each other's footfall. Runner A was told, unbeknownst to runner B, to increase or decrease stride frequency during certain periods of the run. Mm-hmm. And how did runner B respond? Apparently there was a modest mirroring effect. So very, like a slight mirroring effect. But this affected neither heart rate or perceived levels of exertion. So the sort of conclusion is, running with other people has lots of benefits, because actually running with someone with different form, don't worry about it too much, because you're unlikely to mirror them too closely.
That is very interesting, because you often fall into step with other people when you're running, like naturally, kind of like you find yourself sort of hitting the same cadence, same rhythm, but you're obviously running, depending on who you're running with, you tend to run obviously the same pace. So I can see how that happens. You kind of, you do start to sort of sync up. So that's
same thing happens in language. It's called I think it's called phonetic convergence, and it's like, say if you hang around with someone, your voice will end up sounding a little bit more like theirs.
You adopt their either their accent or some sort of like and it's almost like a needing to fit in thing or something. For sure. Like that. Yeah. I heard. I was listening to something the other day that was people were talking about that. So there we go. We all just want to be like each other.
We want to be like each other. That's it. Yeah. How is your running going? People can't see this, but you're actually wearing a vest.
Yeah, I know. This is just for you, mate. I am about to go for a run, and then we needed to record this quickly. So I am in vest and short shorts and a backwards cap, and I'm ready to go because the sun's shining. It's fine. It's going all right. I mean, we've got a slight sort of contingent time, whatever difference going on. The fact this is coming out sort of after I've done Hackney Half, so I'm sort of in the build up to that. So I will have done it. But so hoping that all goes well. I'm just really tired, mate. The running's actually fine. I think I'm just I've reached a very sort of like a drained moment where all the running doesn't feel particularly fantastic because I just feel tired, and I actually probably should just not go running, but at the same time the sun's shining and it's nice to go outside, so it's calling you. It's calling me. So probably a very easy run today, I'd say.
Nice.
In a vest though, so look pro, go slow. That's what I'm gonna is the attitude for today's run.
That's the brand.
That's the brand. Yeah. Continually for life, but especially today. What about you? How's the hour sub hour 10 mile plan?
Yeah, I'm glad I've given myself a certain amount of time to do this. So my rough plan is going to try and do a 4-month training program. So that would be kind of like from mid-June. And until mid-June, I'm going to just try to up the volume a little bit and keep it fairly easy while throwing in the occasional 6-minute mile, just to be like, that's what you got to do. Just a reminder, like, that's what it's going to be like, and it's hard, isn't it? So that I think that I need to do that. Otherwise, I possibly will get injured or maybe just be slightly burnt out by the time it comes around. So easing myself in is the headline there. But it'd be good, definitely be good to follow a plan and have a bit of focus, because I think I haven't had that in my running in a kind of like really concerted way for a while. So it'd be nice to go back into more
here's a
focus
segue into the guest. Who's your coach for this plan, Rick?
Well, Robbie Britton has said that he might offer some advice, and that would be needed, because he's a fantastic runner and a fantastic coach and
a fantastic guest of the week.
Yeah, bring him on.
Oh my god, we're getting good at this. All right.
Guest of the week, here in the studio. Guest of the week, sometimes on the phone. Could be an athlete, could be a physio, or a complete unknown.
Our guest this week is a coach, ultra runner, and the British record holder for 24-hour running. Here's to talk more about the merits of the 10-day training cycle. Welcome back to the podcast, Robbie Britton.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Are you still based in the Italian mountains, Robbie? Where are you at the minute?
I'm in the Italian mountains in our $5,000 apartment, living the dream.
You are.
And now we've got fibre optic rather than relying on a church tower for Wi-Fi.
Wow. Gosh, they're really bringing it forward in those Italian mountains.
Yeah. We're the only people in the village who use it. They installed it into every small village, and then we were like, can we have it? And they were like, yeah, we've got to turn it on though, because no one else is using it. It's just
really?
people. Yeah.
They're just not bothered.
No, I mean, I don't think they even use it. There's still like a little sign. When someone dies, they put a poster up, be like, oh, he's dead.
Carl Claudio's dead.
Yeah, and then they all wander along and look at it and go, oh no, he's dead.
I think bring back the village notice board. I think that's a big thing. Well, there's one by where my mum and dad live. They seem to put up things. They've also got that thing where there was a phone box, and it's now just a library. Like people
we get that,
because that's
just full of Italian books. Nice.
Are you fluent now?
I'm in English. I get by. Should be right for a podcast. My French is still better than my Italian. But it's getting there. And my French is bad as well. I should add that.
Okay.
We bought the apartment in French because the estate agent didn't speak English and I didn't speak Italian.
Are you going as Roberto over there, or keeping it as Robbie?
It's mostly Robbie, but sometimes if Roberto might slip into an introduction. I like that we had the coronation this weekend, and they said, "Did you watch Carlo?" I was like,
Carlo,
King Carlo. I was like, "Oh, Charles, yeah, nah, not a fan." But I'd get behind Carlo a little bit more.
much more exuberant and interesting.
Right, should we get into this the 10-day week stuff then? Most people probably follow a 7-day training cycle, right? They follow like a week training cycle. But this 10-day training cycle seems to be something that some coaches and runners prefer. What are some of the advantages of considering a 10-day training cycle?
Oh, it's a good question. And we're seeing it pop up a bit more. And mainly and this is where it gets interesting, mainly with full-time athletes who don't have the constraints of a normal 7-day week. They don't have a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 6 or shift work to deal with it. And the main benefits are increased recovery between some of those higher stress sessions, namely the long run. The long run's like something that we all chuck in on normally on a Saturday or Sunday every week, and we love it because it's running a long way. And it takes a lot to recover from, right? So like Monday, Tuesday, you're probably a little bit sore, or you're kind of not quite firing all cylinders because of your long run, and then you're getting into your sessions. And if in your kind of traditional setup, you've got a club run on the Tuesday, you've got a tempo run on the Thursday, you've got hills on the Saturday, long run Sunday. Like there just aren't enough days to safely put together all the elements that we see that we should be concluding in our training. So the 10-day cycle will give you the chance to fit a little bit more in, and it varies from athlete to athlete, but it also depends on, like, if you are someone who takes a few more days to recover from your long run, this could be a really useful way to do things. And like I when I saw the 7-day versus 10-day, I wanted to also add in the 14-day option.
Okay.
Which fits more with our calendar, unless we're changing to like the, I don't know how many days in the Ethiopian calendar there is, like, per week, but
Yeah.
the that also is, as a coach, something that I might normally have. Not like, I'm sure some of the athletes I coach wouldn't realise they're on like a 14-day cycle rather than a 7-day, but especially the longer you're running, the longer your long runs might be, and the bigger a stress they are on the body. It might be that, over 14 days, you've got one long run that's a bit meatier, and then the week after, a little bit mellower of a weekend, or focused a little bit more on speed, and then the week after, a little bit longer. And that, I think it's just, the benefits mainly is increased rest between the key sessions that you might have, and a bit more time for that wonderful easy running.
Yeah.
I like this because I think that I think when you get a really hectic, well, in fact, most people might get into running and be presented with a training plan for that first race that they want to do, and it is, here's 12 weeks, and here it progresses up through mileage, and you ramp it up, and and you're introduced to volume quite quickly and fairly aggressively in terms of like how to get fast or run further. So I like the idea that you can kind of almost allow people to discover how best they respond to things, because I think that perhaps people don't at the beginning don't even do that. They just kind of like jump straight in, and if you need 2 days after a big effort, you don't really ever find out, because you just think you should be doing these week cycles. You
see people end up kind of conditioned to fatigue and tiredness, and not realizing that they're supposed to feel all right on some of their runs, and some of their interval sessions aren't supposed to kind of be a massive risk of injury because they're knackered from the long run 36 hours beforehand. And especially, I think, for older runners, where you might see your recovery being impacted or becoming a little bit longer until you retire, then it's wonderful again. Or people new to the sport who maybe on their longer runs, they're broaching new distances, but also they're not maybe, I say this, new to the sport, people at all levels of or experience don't fuel their long runs well enough, don't hydrate well enough, and maybe go off a bit too quick in some of those longer sessions, and they end up increasing the stress of that session, and it takes longer to recover. So I think it's important for people to understand that when you're setting a training plan, for me as a coach, people look at it and they go, well, you've got me this session that's got hills, and this long run, and this interval session, and that's what I've got to get in this week, no matter what order or what kind of gap between it. And actually, it's the gaps between those sessions that I, as a coach, might put more time into. And that's where the individualization of a plan might come in. You might have two people training for the same race, and they've got similar key sessions. Like for a marathon, you want to get in a session with some decent chunks of marathon pace, but you know that the first runner needs time off after that. For whatever reason, he needs 2 or 3 days until the next session. And the other one, he responds quite quickly, or she responds quite quickly to those sessions, and they bounce back. But also, they've got 3 days of work where they have to take off running, or they can only do short stuff. So you end up truncating that week in a different way. So it's so varied that I think it's worth considering. And then as a coach, the flip side is pitching this to athletes.
Yeah,
I have yet to see success in this. This is why I use a 14-day cycle rather than 10. Convincing anyone who's been running for a while to change onto a 10-day cycle and suddenly put their long run on a Wednesday, especially if you're working or you've got the kids, like you've got to drop them off at school and things like that, it's a hard sell. People enjoy the long run, and to kind of convince them that they should do it every 10 days instead of every 7, which is the main part of this, and increase the time between their fun sessions, their hills, their intervals, the ones that they think are bringing them the most bang for their buck. I have yet to convince even myself. I still stick to, and like Tom Cragg's my coach, who you guys are probably familiar with, who runs World. I chatted to him about it this morning. He's like, we kind of like most of the stuff I do is on a 14-day cycle because it does fit into our lives a little bit better.
What might a 10-day cycle look like? We don't have to go into like super details here, but just if someone was like, that's a bit of me, but how do I actually do it? What would it look like?
Well, you know what a 7-day cycle looks like. Just chuck between the sessions.
3 more rest days.
Chuck an extra easier day in there, like 2 extra easy days and a rest day. Bosh, straight in the middle.
But
that's all it'd be.
So it actually works out less long runs, doesn't it? That would be maybe one thing that would count. Would that count against it? Over the course of 4 months, you'd actually end up doing less long runs than you would do in a 7-day?
Yeah, I think you probably would. Like, when people talk about this, I think they stretch out the time between the long runs. That's it. Like that's just 10 days between long runs. That's, in my mind, that's what the difference between a 7-day and a 10-day schedule is. It depends on the athlete. Like, so if you're training for ultras, there might be more mid-length long runs that you fit in. So there might be a bunch of like 90 minutes to 2-hour ones, but there'd be only one that was 2.5 hours every 10 days. It depends on what your long runs look like as well, and what you can sustain. I might then have, especially as you get closer to, say, like a marathon, a goal marathon, your sessions might get bigger. So like even in the midweek, your sessions suddenly look like, or in terms of the time and the distance, long runs, because there's, for example, 4 by 5k at marathon pace, right? And that's your session in the week. And between that, there's a K easy, and before that, there's a 10 to 15 minute warm up, and then there's that little stagger at the end we call a cool down. Riscaldamento in Italian. There you go.
Hello.
That's way better, isn't it? It's way better.
Immediately better.
And then, so that then becomes a long run, and then you need to pay more respect to that. So it might be that you try this out in some of your bigger weeks when the sessions are getting a bit bigger. So then you just need 2 or 3 days before you start doing something a bit feistier again. And that might be, it depends what you respond to, but it might be a rest day and then 2 easy days. It might be a couple of days with double runs. So the volume still stays similar. It doesn't mean that I think one of the reasons people will be wary about this would be like, well, hold on a second. I want to get X miles in a week. If my long run's removed, how am I going to do this? And there are many ways to get 20 miles into a day. And one of the wonderful ones is to do 2 10-mile runs instead of a 20-mile run. And that might be how you change it round. So you're actually keeping the volume the same, but the load and the stress in one hit is different. It might be that you have a 90 minutes and a 30 minutes instead of a 2-hour run. And that's it's a slightly different stress on the body. And that's how you might vary it a little bit. So it just kind of stretches things out, and you're just giving a bit more space between those really kind of hard-hitting, higher stress, higher load workouts.
This is the Runner's World podcast.
Do you think that this approach is really only applicable to those doing like marathon or ultra or sort of like that sort of longer distance stuff? Or do you think the fact that you're giving yourself more chance of recovery means that if you are chasing 5k in a big way and you're putting in a lot of speed work and a lot of like effort, the load obviously is, the stresses from training are still high, but volume isn't really an issue. Do you think that 10 days is still a good approach in terms of giving yourself enough chance to sort of recover, or do you think 7's fine for shorter distance?
No, I think it's a good question. To be honest, it steps slightly down from my area of expertise, and I'm sure there are people if someone disagrees, definitely get them to write in. But when the shorter the distance you go, the more important the speed of those workouts becomes. So actually, I think it might make even more sense at that point, because the long runs are generally short. I think it was like Laura Muir's coach, like 70 to 80 minutes was the longest long run they're doing, right? She goes quite far in that distance, even less than that. And far in that time, not distance. And you need to have that pop, that spring in your step to do those shorter sessions faster. So I'm sure they respect that the time between the sessions just as much or more so than the longer distance runners, because for a longer distance, for like 5k, half marathon and up, like an ultra, one of the training benefits that we're after is that accumulated fatigue of that training. Whereas for the short distances, you're less after kind of, I want the athlete to feel kippered on a regular basis, and train whilst kippered. But that's not really what they're after. That's part of our training benefit.
Yeah.
That's part of our training kind of stimulus is the accumulated fatigue, whereas that's less so in the shorter distances. So I imagine this would probably work even better for. Yeah, it's probably, I don't know if it's more common in the shorter distances. Yeah, I don't know for certain, but that's what my thought. The importance of being fresh for sessions becomes higher in the shorter distances.
I'm interested now in this the 2-week cycle, the 14-day cycle, because in some ways it feels like the best of both worlds. That you can probably get in over 14 days all the key sessions that you might feel like you're cramming into a week, but you're kind of still on the same calendar as most people. Strava can still work like that. I mean, would that be your default approach now as a coach and as a runner, to think more in the lines of it's the 14 day by 14 day cycle rather than a week by week thing?
It depends on the athlete, but like as I kind of zone in from like the bigger picture, and then you start like looking in the smaller picture. Yeah, I like to look at 2 weeks. One, because you can vary that load and where it's coming from over those 2 weeks, and an athlete is still comfortable that they're getting a longer run, but maybe not as stressful a longer run 1 week, and then they can see that, they can trust in that process a little bit, rather than if they look at 1 week or 10 days and suddenly their long run's gone, they're like, oh, where's it gone? Like, when am I going to get that back? And it also means that say you kind of building up one of the sessions I quite like is continuous hills, right? Up and down a little hill. It's good loading on the body. It's quite a hard session, so you kind of space it out. But also you've got to do it reasonably regularly, so you don't kind of lose the gains you had from it. You don't want to be recovering for the first time, getting DOMs each time you're doing it. So if you do that over 2 weeks, so say it's on a Wednesday, and then 2 weeks later you've got the same session, you recover from it, you can fit in some different sessions. You might do something a bit more marathon pace or some faster intervals. You might have a long run with intervals in there as well, or with efforts. And then that kind of, within 2 weeks, you've recovered from it, you've got time for the other stuff. You're not just doing continuous hills, because that can be quite tough. But you're kind of progressing as it goes, and that session might go from 5x6 to 3x8 to 3x10 to 12, 10, 8, lots of continuous hills, and vary it like that. But you're progressing over 2 weeks rather than doing it every week. And you, alongside that, you might be doing, okay, well, depending on what you're training for, we're building up from shorter efforts at marathon pace, and then we're actually getting some longer continuous marathon pace workouts in there as well. But you don't want to do that every week, because you're just going to get like tired of running your marathon pace constantly. So then that can vary over a 2 week cycle, where you're not, it's kind of not too far apart that you're recovering, like starting and losing that conditioning, but it's far enough apart that we can fit a whole variety of sessions in. So yeah, so I quite like a 2 week overview of someone's training.
Do you train any older athletes? Because I'm wondering if the 10 day or the 14 day might have particular benefit to older people who might have more flexibility in their work life anyway, but also might need more recovery.
Yeah, that's generally, I spoke to a couple of athletes who are a bit older, like in 50s and 60s, talking to them about stretching. They're the athletes I've said we could stretch this out a bit. Sometimes, because a lot of these have been training all their lives, right? So the chance to turn things around is harder. But yeah, if your recovery changes over time, and you can't do what you're used to, or you can't recover as quick as you used to, it makes sense to stretch that out a little bit and add a bit more recovery in there. But equally, it works just as well with someone younger who's new to the sport, because they also might be being stressed by in a kind of higher level than they might do when they're more conditioned, more used to it. And some of that's like a physiological adaptation. Some of that's just like the logistics around it. Like as you get better at it, like as you get more experience, you get better at your fueling, you get better organized, hopefully, around kind of getting in from a run and having some food afterwards, rather than just kind of waiting all afternoon and forgetting it. You get used to having the right kit, you get used to having fueling well on that run. So it depends on how well you recover, but generally as you get older, you're going to need a little bit more recovery from the same sessions than you were when you were younger. But that involves admitting that to yourself and that you're aging, which is
it's hard, isn't it? That's the hard bit.
I think this appeals just generally, I think, from a busy life point of view. That's really where I'm coming from. Like it sounds, you've got so many hours in the week, and as you say, there's school runs to do, and there's feeding small people and getting everything sorted for the next day before you can even sort of contemplate where you're going to get your training in. So if you're sitting on that 7 week plan going, today's got to be intervals and I've got to fit it in here because I've got this on Wednesday and that on Thursday, it kind of all backs up. Whereas if you can break it down a bit more and give yourself those bit more breathing room, that in itself just makes it seem less stressful.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, it gives you more flex, right?
Yeah.
So like if you're on a 10-day or 14-day cycle, you could move that interval session one day or the other and actually it doesn't impact it too much. Whereas if you're kind of, if it's, everything's tightly fitted in, there's no flex at all there, is there? You've got to get that done, because otherwise that one's impacted and the long run's gone, and then you're not making the club run on the Tuesday, because then you've got Thursday. And I was thinking as well, like an analogy for some of our listeners, your listeners, not ours, but I've taken them, they're mine. Can't get them back now. A good way of thinking about it, right, is as we get older, right, and say we go out for a night on the booze, right, and we have a few glasses of wine, a beer, maybe some shots, the amount of time we need to recover from that lengthens as we get older. So we might do, instead of going out like 2 or 3 times a week as we were younger and recovering and feeling good from that, that becomes like a 7-day thing, right? Okay, like once every 7 days we'll have a night out and we recover from it. Our long run is a heavy night out on the source, and we need 3 or 4 days to recover from it before we can even contemplate talking to someone else. And as we get older still, we need the 10 days before, and eventually it becomes, like, I don't know, several years.
Between several year training plan, yeah.
How quickly we recover from a night out varies as we get older. And the long run's the same. Like, it's just, you need a bit more time to recover from it. So do your mates, hopefully. So you can convince your friends to join you on a Tuesday long run. But it's just our body's ability to recover and bounce back from doing stupid things or hard things varies with age.
Well, talking about hard things, then, what's next in terms of your own running? What's the next goal, would you say?
So I've been selected to run for Great Britain again at the 24-hour World Champs, which is in Taipei in December. So yeah, that's the next kind of big goal for me, and everything works back from that. So I haven't, like, I've got a half marathon on Sunday, which should be fun, and like, other than that, like, it's just kind of a bit piecemeal in the middle. I'm looking for something to do over the summer, but something that leaves me fresh and mentally and physically ready to do a real tough block of training through the autumn, because with a 24-hour race in Feb and another one in December, it's a pretty long year. So I am currently in between races and training blocks.
How do you cope with that then? Because if you're presented with a summer of having to make a decision on, like, oh, I could just go off and essentially what people would probably call junk miles, but I just call nice running. What would you feel about just going and doing some of that? Because you obviously live somewhere wonderfully idyllic and good looking that you could go and do some light hit mountains and all that sort of stuff. Or do you now just, is your mindset like, well, if I go and did that up there, but it's not going to there's no benefit?
If you looked at my tabs right now, there are 3 or 4 different random races that I shouldn't do open. I work with my coach Tom Craggs, and basically I want to be really, really good at 24-hour running. So like a lot of the decisions I make are based around being as good as I can be. Like, I feel like it's my forte, and I'd like to see how good I can be. I do love running on the trails. There's no one, I don't know if anyone truly loves running around in circles for 24 hours. They like being good at it. They like competing. Do they love running around in small concrete loops? Probably not.
Yeah.
I do have a love for it, but like, it's a weird love. It's mainly tied to me being good at it. If I was rubbish at it, I don't think I'd love it that much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to do some adventurous stuff in the summer. I raced as part of a relay on Sunday, uphill race, and I was slower by about 5 minutes on this 90-minute uphill than I was last year, and it had me thinking a massive amount about, like, the specificity of my training. So over the last 12 months since, I've been really focused on the flat stuff, and I've got better by a long way at the flat stuff, which is what I'm good at. And I've got worse at the stuff that involves running up the side of mountains, because, well, that's a mountain, right? And it made me think, like, if I go and spend the summer doing not junk miles, but like, if I focus on something I enjoy a little bit more, like trail running, like make the most of the 1,500 meter climb that we've got on our doorstep, which my wife enjoys, because you get to come down 1,500 meters as well afterwards. Will that take away from my ability to run 24 hours effectively for my country in December?
Yeah.
It's a hard one. And that's where I kind of get caught. Like, I want to be really, really good. Like we got one guy called Alexander Sorokin who's a step above the rest of us. But if he has a bad day, I want to be there to take up. I want to be in the fight for
great.
That,
absolutely,
hit that spot. So
yeah. Great, Robbie. That's really good. I'm really glad to hear it. Yeah. Am I right in thinking that like the 200 miles in 24 hours is like the 4-minute mile of 24-hour running?
It wasn't, and now it is. It seems a bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
Alexander's tried. He got to like 319 kilometers, so like just under. I mean, you're the first person I've heard refer it to as that. I guess it could be. I mean, there are only, I want to say, like there's less than 20 people who run 100 miles under 12 hours. So to do it twice, there's only one man in the world who's attempting that. As I suppose the 4-minute mile, there was a few. Old Landy was trying to get there before Bannister and a few of the Scandinavians. Whereas none of us, other than Alexander, are focused on running 200 miles in 24 hours. And honestly, I think if his next attempt is in Taipei at the World Champs, it's not the right. It's a humid and reasonably warm place. It's not going to be the place for it. So I don't think it's under threat this year. He got close last year and at a European Champs as well, which was fantastic to watch. I don't know, like maybe the 300k is our 4-minute mile, and we've now had 3 people break that. Alexander, one of the Polish internationals, and Yanis Kouros, the goat in our flat roadie circles. So yeah, I mean 300k, maybe the 4-minute mile for us.
I like that. Yeah,
and Alexander's Hisham El Garouche running like that 3:43 mile, which is a bit ridiculous. He doesn't work on I think he works on something like a 2-day week, and he gets a normal person's like weekly training into every 2 days. So that's totally different. Like it's bringing it the other direction, because he'll do like intense workouts and long runs at altitude, and I think he's averaging like, I don't think he's far off 300k a week.
Wow.
On a lot of weeks.
Wow. Isn't he a croupier? Isn't he in the casino?
He's retired. I don't know if retired is the right word. He's gone full time with his running since the lockdown.
Dice.
Like he can, he's chucking cards into the sky now. Like, but yeah, he went full time, and that's been a big change for him. I think he goes and spends real big blocks at altitude, like either Kenya, this latest one at Phoenix, not Phoenix. I want to say Flagstaff, Arizona, in the last one, and spends big blocks out there doing frankly horrendous looking volumes of training and intensity at altitude. So but I'm not even joking. I think he gets the average person's training into 2 days.
It's amazing.
So it's the other end of the scale. Maybe that's what's next.
All right, next episode, the 2-day training cycle. Yeah.
Robbie, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for your time talking about the merits of the 10-day and the 14-day training cycle. Really interesting. I think a lot of people listening will take a lot away from that. So thanks for your time.
I don't think any of them will adapt it though, unless they're retired. But even then, but it's what works for you, right? What works for you. Yeah. If all you take from this podcast is that you're going to respect the recovery between your sessions, be it on a 7 or a 10-day cycle, then we've done our job.
So that brings us to the end of this week's Runners World podcast. Thanks very much to our guest, Robbie Britton, and to you, of course, for listening.
You can subscribe to just 3 issues of Runners World. Go to runnersworld.co.uk/podcast offer to get an exclusive £5 offer for 3 issues, if that wasn't clear. Please subscribe to this podcast. If you don't already, keep listening. We are getting better at it. So, slowly but surely over the years. So if you stick with us, I promise it will probably be really good in about 4 years' time. Thanks a lot. Bye.